Cool. So, welcome everyone to today's webinar on building advisory services for crop and mixed farming clients. Thanks for joining. This webinar will be recorded and sent out afterwards, and we're going to be speaking for roughly 45 minutes. My name's Matt McLaughlin. I'm a partner manager for Figured, based out of Melbourne, and I'm joined by my co-host and fellow partner manager, Andy Drinkwater. And Duran Millhall, our partner success specialist, will be monitoring the chat box. So if you've got any questions throughout the call today, just pop them in that Q&A section. And we're also really lucky to be joined by our guest today, Jim Dennis, director at Newton and Henry Accountants based in Launceston, Tasmania. Jim's been rolling out Figured across a range of cropping and mixed farming enterprises for a number of years now. And he's going to be sharing some of his valuable experiences about what's working, what's changing, and how he's adapting his approach to meet those shifting needs. So, Jim, warm welcome, taking your time to share your knowledge with us today, and really looking forward to diving into this discussion shortly.
Sure.
Cool. So this webinar is all about exploring how advisors can support these cropping and mixed enterprises as their needs evolve and in the face of today's volatile market. So we did see quite a few farmers, bank managers and consultants sign up for today. So welcome if that's one of you. The discussion is still going to provide the valuable context for everyone across the farm financial ecosystem. And you'll hear a bit about this as a theme throughout today around bringing that whole farming team closer together. So without further ado, Andy, I'm going to pass it over to you and kick off the discussion about what farmers are looking for now.
Cool. Cheers, Matt. And g'day, everyone. And like Matt said, big welcome and thanks for taking the time to catch up today. So kicking off with what farmers are looking for right now. Australian farming is a dynamic landscape. And we're seeing sort of incredible drive in innovation and growth, but also plenty of pressures across the market. From navigating droughts and rising input costs to sort of optimizing cash flow and sort of managing refinancing with the bank. It can often feel like, farmers can be constantly reacting rather than sort of proactively driving the business forward. However, we are seeing more and more farmers, actively seeking, the right tools and advice to gain sort of greater control or clarity and confidence on the numbers. I think just sort of looking beyond managing the present and wanting to look ahead and strategically sort of plan for the future. As Matt just introed Jim, really keen to get, your perspective here, Jim, around sort of, what are some of the key things, you're hearing from your farmers right now?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I mean, the list that you've got on the screen there gives a pretty good insight to the sort of things we're seeing. I mean, when I started using Figured back in 2016, I was certainly, as an advisor and accountant, focused much more on the compliance space and, helping clients understand what their results were, but not what they're going to be, given a set of assumptions and taking into account the risks that they're thinking about. And certainly see that now a lot more that whilst they still are very interested and maintain the same level of interest in their compliance work being done well, they're certainly far more interested in looking forward and having a means of doing that that's efficient and easy for them to deal with.
Yeah, now have you sort of noticed at all a shift on maybe what farmers are sort of expecting from their accountant?
Yeah, I think definitely, and there's a lot of people moving into this area as well, which is great for the industry. Better supporting it and what have you. But yeah, definitely seeing a lot more appetite for support around understanding their results, understanding where they'll be well before they get there, given a base set of assumptions and those sorts of things. But yeah, definitely a shift there and an appetite for that additional information and the advice that goes along with it.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. I think that advice piece and being that trusted advisor to really support that conversation for anyone in the farming team, even going to the banks, right? Hey, Matt, just going to pass it over to you now, mate. If you just click next slide and touch on the challenges advisors are facing.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Andy, and some interesting points in there, Jim, to kind of kick off. Um, so this list, I guess, touched on some of the more prominent challenges we hear advisors facing when it comes to, moving that needle from perhaps a reactive advisory services into more proactive advisory. And if clients are changing what they need from us, I guess one of the big questions is how do we meet them where they're at? So, some of these points were kind of, mentioned, you already sort of brought up, Jim, but I guess drilling down onto maybe this evolving client needs point and specifically the generational challenges part, as we hear this kind of come up a lot in the market. Are you able to add a bit of color as to how this challenge comes up in Newton Henry and what you're doing to work through those conversations?
Yeah, well, it's definitely a familiar theme for us, and I'm sure others on the call that work in the same space. Yeah, definitely on the generational change. There's always tension, perhaps not the right word, but there's that requirement. There's change and generational change going on in our farming businesses, and having things that support those that are increasing their involvement and potentially and specifically on the financial side and how they can do that, and as others might be transitioning out. And I've certainly seen how we've used Figured as a tool in some real examples to help that evolution occur and potentially take some of the tension out of that. And definitely our clients are demanding from us that we can give them support on that.
Mm, yeah, definitely having everyone across the one set of numbers can facilitate that transition in those conversations. That's interesting. And moving one section over to resource constraints. We can have a webinar around advisor challenges and things like that if it's not bringing up this point, as it's obviously a big issue, and it appears to be sort of that while talent's sort of leaving the industry and less is arriving. It's just I'm interested to kind of drill into how you're tackling the resourcing challenges at Newton Henry in relation to perhaps the farm advisory services piece.
It's on a few different fronts. It is definitely a challenge. For a long time, I've probably done this work just on my own. So we provide lots of services in the office. I do a variety of service, but on the farm advisory side, for a long time, I've just really done it as a standalone advisor using Figured to support that. But increasingly now, I am working on building up some of the rest of the team so that there's a team approach to supporting clients that are using Figured. And that starts with the configuration of the file stage. So there's a lot of one-off things you do, when you're setting up almost anything, but Figured's no different to that you'll probably never do again. And so as part of the way we onboard a client with Figured now, we have a set checklist that aligns to some of the standard training methods that Figured put out, but also some things that are specific to Newton and Henry about how we'd set up a file. And so I can use members of the team to do that more efficiently and cost effectively for the client. And they're things that they'll never do again. So it's not something that's worthwhile wasting their time on learning because, as I said, they'll never do it again. So there's that part. And then there's also the ongoing support and making sure they've got more than one person they can call. And so bringing other team members up to a reasonable standard of competency is something we've worked on a lot over the last couple of years, so that there's more than one person that can support a client. That requires also just from an industry level as well. So we've got some members of the team that have done quite a bit in Figured in dairy, and others that have done more mixed cropping and grazing. And so we try and make sure that there's someone in most industries that we can support, because some of the applications are slightly different, and that's a figured thing, but also how we do it. So yeah, it's definitely been a constraint, and of more recent time though, one that I think we're delivering a better service, and we've still got work to do in it, definitely. But having more people in the office that can support the client. If I'm in a meeting or if I'm out on a farm visit and another client has decided that's their morning, they want to update their forecast and hit a wall and they get stuck on something technically, they really need to be able to call someone or message them and get a hand. And we're well on the way to having that bit covered as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really sounds like you're getting those sort of specialists in the different areas. And when we are chatting the other day, you kind of mentioned around, getting things out of your head around making things like routine and repeatable, which it seems like, you're definitely building into, which is more so, which is awesome. Um, just touching on the next point here around data, and I'm sure everyone listening on the call is sort of familiar with the old adage of, garbage in, garbage out. Obviously, it's a key component for running a successful business, to have good data, particularly as conditions are changing frequently. I'm interested to know a bit more on this piece, Jim. What role does data play, into your services?
I guess, well, critically, I mean, if you want to support a client with reasonable advice, you need to know enough about their real situation. Otherwise, you're really just making general statements, and without that key context, and having good data available to base that advice on is key. And I mean, I'm very open with clients about this. If I don't know enough about them, I'm really not much use to them. And so getting to a reasonable knowledge about where they're at and where they're likely to end up quickly and efficiently is really important. One very common complaint from farmers around understanding their results is around having good access to compare their plan to what's actually happened. And this was a long term, and many on the call I'm sure will be familiar with the old, I can't quickly compare where I'm at against the budget, what we gave the bank or the goals we set for ourselves. And figured as for us has definitely delivered on that in an efficient way. That the live link into Xero or whatever accounting system you may be using, but for us it's predominantly Xero, that they can do really quickly and have the confidence that if they've got their files reconciled and up to date, they don't have to spend enormous amounts of time in Excel with the risk of formula errors, etc., and just the time wasted trying to bring the plan against the actuals. So yeah, definitely a challenge that we're facing, but one I think Figure definitely provides a solution for.
Mm. You just jumping in on that as well, Matt and Jim, we've had a question in the chat around seeing an integration with AgriWebb, and I think that just plays right into that connected sort of data piece there as well. And thanks for dropping that in, Annabelle. So we're looking at sort of later in the year, and we're also reaching out to partners and farmers at the moment, and for any feedback or ideas on the sorts of data that you're looking to flow between the two systems. So yeah, we'll follow up after this, and yeah, look forward to touching base.
And I can
Yeah.
vouch for Andy that that's real. I've been on a couple of calls with Figured and AgriWebb. I mean, AgriWebb is incredibly popular in Tasmania, and so when I'm working with clients, it's very common that if we're doing the livestock rec update in the tracker, that they've got their phone out, getting the numbers straight off AgriWebb, and hopefully before too long, that step will be a little more integrated between the two systems. So yeah, that's a genuine thing that's actually happening in the background at the moment, and would be a big efficiency gain for us all.
Yeah, that's awesome. And thanks for calling that out, Andy, as well. And Jim, I think you'd mentioned on chat the other day, just, having that data to be reliable and verifiable is so key, in these systems too. So the last couple of points on here, and whether we drill into this much now or later, we've kind of spoken, a little bit about the tech, but, I'm interested, Jim, with your approach to the introduction of tech, within your firm and your clients. Is there any sort of particular approach you kind of wanted to call out here?
Probably a few things. One, just culturally having it part of the firm's DNA that we should always be looking for solutions um, that technology can provide. We're fortunate being an independent firm that we can make those choices ourselves and try different things, and that's certainly working well for us. So there's the tech in terms of the applications like Figured, and then there's the add-ons that you can use to help support clients just with the general support of Figured. So we use an application called Loom, where we can, if someone's got a query about how to do something in Figured, the traditional way was we had to catch up on the phone, you'd explain your woe, I'd try and solve it. But what we tend to do now is we get a bit of feedback on the barrier or issue that someone's having. We'll go into Figured, use Loom to record what we do to navigate their way through that problem or to fix whatever issue they have, and just flick them that recording. And it's a great bit of tech just to make it more convenient too for the client. And it couples really well with Figured so that they can see what we're doing navigating around the application. And quite often indirectly they learn something from that. So they might see us do something that wasn't even part of the question they had, and they learn something from it. So a really critical thing, and trying to bring the other tech that they're like AgriWeb as part of this, that we're not duplicating things and creating another app that they've got to have on their phone or tablet to deal with, that we use other information they've already got.
Yeah, that's awesome and a great call out. I'm glad you brought up Loom, as we're a big advocate too, and we use that a lot with the ways we work. So I guess yeah, kind of like moving into changing these challenges into opportunities. Kind of called out some of these and moving from reactive into more sort of proactive, ongoing advisory, and getting ahead of issues and planning earlier, manage time better, keeping on top of your client's business and building out that team capability as well. I guess all of these are opportunities that kind of come from those challenges and some points you've called out. I'm just wondering if you wanted to add anything else to these opportunities there, Jim.
Yeah, probably the biggest challenge that once we got the capability up in using Figured ourselves is to really do this in a cost-effective way for the client. You really do need to get their competency up in Figured as well, or absent Figured, moving away from my old way of working, which was really around spreadsheets, which worked well enough, but I really couldn't do them and update them efficiently enough to do the jobs as cost effectively as we can with Figured. And it also meant that routine and reliable way of doing things wasn't as easy to teach other team members to do as well. So that's certainly been a big challenge, moving away from spreadsheets and the risks of errors and the lack of repeatability and the reliance on clients to have those Excel skills as well has definitely been something we've been able to take advantage of, and an opportunity that's working well with Figured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's awesome to hear. And I'm sure it's prompted some people on the call to think about, how perhaps they could reframe some of these challenges into opportunities for themselves. Cool. So I'm gonna pass it back to Andy now, who's gonna put some of this into context as it relates to Figured being the connected platform.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Matt. Hey, and before we dive into a structured approach to advisory, just want to sort of quickly touch on this slide to those especially newer to Figured. Figured is a cloud-based platform specifically built to handle the unique complexities of mixed farming and cropping operations. So, it doesn't really matter if you're supporting a purely cropping enterprise or a livestock focused farm, or even a combination of both. Figured brings, all those pieces of the puzzle as such into sort of one central, like, integrated platform, and it manages all the critical on-farm production data tracking, so that sort of crop performance or your livestock movements, inventory, and it's directly linking that to the financial side of the business. So all of your forecasting, or your annualized sort of longer term planning, the budgeting, the comprehensive reporting out the back end of it. And, Jim touched on it earlier as well, with that sort of seamless live integration with your accounting software, Xero, MYOB, or QuickBooks Online. This really ensures that everyone is working with that most sort of current financial information, right? And, ultimately Figured sort of becomes this single, reliable source of truth for the entire farming team. And we've got on the screen there, right, the farmer, the banker, advisor, accountant, consultant, whoever's in the team, to be across that same set of financial and production data. And before we jump in and have a bit of a look at this workflow in Figured from Matt to show us through, and we touched on those challenges earlier as well, around sort of time constraints, the inconsistent data, the ad hoc requests moving from, reactive to proactive. Jim, keen to throw a question your way, around, how's this type of sort of integrated way of working really changed the way you work with your farming clients?
Yeah, I guess it's the tool that, as I covered or mentioned a minute ago, that can make it efficient, and that's a really important bit, because what we found is that we would spend lots of time. So you have a client come into the office for their regular check-in, and you'd spend 80% of the time preparing the data so that you could start to give the advice and for them to start to make decisions. And that might include, as an output, sending some information to the bank. And so you can get to that point a lot faster with the system and having that one spot. So you using it as sort of the central point to bring the various aspects of their business together into one place. I mean, I often have it on the screens when someone walks in, just opening on the dashboard. If we're having a meeting with the bank or with the family, the dashboard provides a great way just to sort of give everyone immediate context around where the business is at. So it is great for that, sort of bring it all together in one place.
Yeah, really sort of, thanks for that. Really shifting from, that older way of working you mentioned earlier around spreadsheets, and shifting to this new way around sort of a connected tech stack, really enabling those opportunities we touched on as well from challenges, right? Hey, Matt, gonna pass it over to you to showcase some of this workflow in Figured now.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, so this diagram shows the core data flow in Figured, just before we jump in and run a quick demo. But as I chat through this, think about how this works in relation to you and your clients. It might be tempting to go about this right now. So moving from left to right, first you'll see actuals come down from your accounting system, whether that be Xero, MYOB, or QuickBooks, and they're flowing into Figured here. And now your allocations are used to build up a view for gross margin reporting. And that's by dictating where income and expenses are sent for the related production enterprises. So for example, anytime your client sells a crop harvest and that's reconciled in your accounting system, you can have allocation rules that will automatically send this to the right place. And to have that sort of reliable, real-time, verifiable data, it must link in with your accounting system. And this really provides the foundations to combine production with financial data and actuals with rolling forecast data. And with your farm specific insights and your three-way reporting across cash flow, P&L, and balance sheet, you really see where that business has been, where it is today, and where it's likely to be heading in the future. So Figured kind of becomes this GPS, allowing you to update your forecast on the fly as actuals from your accounting system are providing that instant feedback. And it paints the clearer picture of farm performance without the manual data wrangling. So ultimately, freeing up more of your time to be applying this information with really quality conversations. So as Jim mentioned, less time on the administration and more time for the application and decision making. And now, Jim, I might just put a question to you, mate, before we jump into the demo. I'm wondering if you wanted to add anything on in relation to this workflow and to whether it's, time saving or, understanding your clients' businesses more.
Yeah, definitely time saving wise, having it there, having the key assumptions in one place that both you and the farmer can work with, or the farmer's production advisor, and we're not exchanging Excel sheets. We can just do that really efficiently. We can be in the same application at the same time, working on that. Yeah, so I mean, lots of examples of where that's working well for us, and really just having that place rather than email exchanges on multiple versions of Excel sheets, having it all in one place here, and being able to set up how figures used to suit that business, whether that be in a cropping business or in a livestock business, or in dairy indeed, with multiple dairies. Those sorts of things are definitely efficiency is one of the things that we've really been needing in our processes so that we can get to the advice and support bit faster, and that's what Figured's enabled.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thanks for that. That provides some good context. Just as we jump into the demo. So I'm essentially just going to give you a high level demo so you can understand a bit more about how that diagram actually works in practice. So firstly, when you jump on the dashboard, and Jim, you brought up this dashboard already before, there's a few key metrics and graphs here which are perfect for sort of kicking off that conversation with your client at a high level before drilling down further. And with a live rolling forecast, you're going to be able to see the shape of your client's actuals plus forecast cash flow measured against an original budget. And we do find that less is more in some cases with your clients. So you can actually sort of add and remove, widgets and KPIs from this dashboard as you need to suit that farm business. So how is data actually entering the system? So Figured will automatically sync in the background multiple times a day with whether that be the connected accounting system Zero Mild or QuickBooks. So it's syncing automatically, but you can actually run a manual sync if you want to see, any sort of immediate changes you made in your accounting system flow and reconcile into Figured. So that will sort of run over 20, 30 seconds and it's all completely up to date. And Figured operates within the cloud, obviously, and it's a single ledger concept. So think of Figured as your farm specific lens that allows you to look out the front windshield for that farming business. Now, if you think back to that diagram, moving into the allocations piece, this is where you can point actual direct income and cost to the related production enterprises for building up the gross margin reporting. So you'll be able to choose what accounts flow into here and then line them up with the associated production. And you can actually create allocation rules here as well. So if I jump into that page, so for example, if I wanted to add a rule for, say, my canola sales accounts, and I wanted this to automatically, send to my canola tracker, anytime that's reconciled in the accounting system, it will go to the right place. So if I jump back and look through my example here, we've got a canola sales transaction. So this would effectively, after I save that rule, automatically be sent to the right enterprise and I wouldn't have to do anything. And you also notice the production quantity has been entered in zero. So that just further streamlines how we can pick up and automate the rule for that production if you're wanting to track that level with your client. So yeah, this all means you can collaborate better together to match a structure that makes sense for their business by streamlining the data flow and enabling better outcomes. And Andy's going to go into more detail later on the reporting side to show the varying levels of detail you can use to match your client requirements. So I'm just going to go into the operations trackers part. So this is a lot of where the magic really happens. These trackers are created to store production information associated with each of the, mixed farming enterprises. So firstly, starting off in inventory, looking at this demo farm, you'll see here we provide a summary of all your homegrown and purchase inventory products within one screen across actuals and forecast. So that provides a great level of visibility before drilling down further. And you can add, any type of homegrown or purchase inventory through the product list by selecting them, or even creating your own custom ones. Now, jumping into the homegrown products, you can see on this demo farm, we're growing barley, wheat, and canola. And reviewing these columns here, your opening stock will roll over from prior seasons, or you can start out by entering it for the season in these cells. And if your client's, tracking that yield information from harvest, it's entered in here. And again, you can match the level of detail that they're, using, but it's not essential if you don't have that information. Your actual sales will find their way here through the rules we just discussed. And you've also got the ability to add a use. So whether that's using product for feed, for seed, or for bedding, or likewise, writing it off as well will reduce the quantity. And moving into the forecasting side, it's all really easy just in the one screen. So say, for example, sticking with the canola sales, all I would need to do is just select my canola account and my tracker. Let's say I'm going to sell off 300 tons and that's, forecasted to be 720 per unit. I can just hit the tick and that's going to save that, reduce the on-hand quantity and have my forecast closing there. So again, Andy's going to provide more context to this later, but just understand with inventory, you've got the flexibility to track crops at the most granular level for those advanced clients, or the highest level for those clients who are starting out or maybe just want an overall enterprise performance. And with the rolling forecast functionality, you can build out your production plan for as long as you like. So now moving into livestock, in a similar fashion, you've got the ability to bring in actual sales and forecast within this rolling plan. So if I'm going to click import from zero in this instance, you'll be able to import those mapped accounts across your sales and purchases for any type of livestock. And as you saw earlier, when that quantity is entered in the accounting system, it does make importing just that one step easier, although you can enter it at the time of import. And you're going to be getting that, the average dollar per head, which is very useful for those client conversations too. And so that's the importing of the actuals. And then moving into my next screen where I've just literally flipped over to 2026 in the same page. You can build out that baseline plan very easily too, just by importing last year's actuals on the production side. And then you'll be able to jump in on a monthly basis and, quickly reforecast whether that's at a total per head, hit the tick, and that's going to add the production as subsequently the financial impacts will be linking up with your three-way reporting. So that's a really quick overview of the production elements of, inventory and livestock. And I am just going to finish in the planning grid as this, ties it all together for that reporting side. And, you've got similar functionality around importing last year's actuals to start out your baseline plan for the year. But Jim, I just want to throw a couple of questions back to you on this to kind of hear about, some of your favorite parts in this screen. I think we kind of talked about it before. Did you want to call out some pieces, some functionality on here that you like using?
Yeah, definitely. First one is we really stress to clients the need to really understand their operating profit, or their bank might call it EBITDA, and Figured provides a way that your accounting system doesn't, to configure a report really quickly that you can see what the engine room of the farm, the business is doing before you've dealt with CapEx, interest, the tax office, and family drawings and payments. And so that operating surplus line is a really critical one. And using the collapse all, expand all function just to be able to, as you're working through the building up the budget or the forecast, being able to go back down and check where that number's at is really important. I mean, from a data integrity point of view, I explain the planning grid. It's basically an online Excel sheet without the chance of a formula error. So, I mean, once you get your eyes attuned to it, it's a really familiar looking way that you would build out a cash flow for your farm. If you were starting from scratch in Excel, it's a really familiar looking screen. Whereas if you look at what your accounting software produces, especially from a cash perspective, I mean, the reporting and the way you deal with it is really not as user friendly. So within this screen too, those efficiency things that you've got there, the dynamic modes. So being able to link a percentage. So it might be selling costs, for example. If I know the client's commission rate with their selling agents 4%, I can just link the sales account to that, and that's already automated. A superannuation is obviously a very easy one. Don't have to forecast that anymore. You just link the statutory rate to the wages accounts, and it just calculates superannuation for you as you go. And just if you're doing a budget for the first time without any historicals, without the benefit of being able to copy over last year, the copy and spread function too, where you can simply say, oh yeah, it'll be about 10,000 a year, and simply spread that over the whole year, is a time saver and a great way to get someone a first draft, especially if they're just starting to use the product. They might have given us an annual budget, but hadn't broken it down monthly. We could take that for them, quickly split it out by month, and then give it back to them to deal with seasonality and aspects of the business that they might be more familiar with than us, to get the budget tuned up. But yeah, I don't know whether you're going to cover the snapshot function as well, which is here, but that's a really powerful part of Figured. Basically, being able to set your annual plan, save that down, and be able to refer back to that at any point, and then just continually reforecasting as many times as you like and being able to compare to those points. So where I'm supporting a client that might have a routine regular check-in with us, or they might have a board meeting on their own schedule, you can take a snapshot before and any meeting presentations you've done, and always be able to refer back to that. And those advisors out there doing tax planning, which is pretty relevant this time of the year, you can do your forecast, get it up to date, talk to your client about likely end of year, take the tax planning spreadsheet snapshot, and then be able to, when you finish the actuals, compare back really quickly to say, hey, did the tax plan back in April. We thought you were going to land here. Here's where you did land, and here's the variances. And that's done with a couple of button clicks, and a report that's really easy for them to see the variances versus the old spreadsheet approach and then having version control issues. Once you've taken the snapshot, it's there and doesn't go anywhere.
Absolutely. Yeah, some great points, Jim. I consider better myself, and all of those snapshots are flexible to be reported on in the reporting section. Yeah, awesome. So what I might do now is just kind of round off and hand back to Andy. But essentially, we've taken you through a bit of a demo across the actual allocations, production, and then touched on a bit of that reporting there. But Andy is going to build on these workflows and kind of make sense of the outputs with a more structured approach. So over to you, Andy. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Cool. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, okay, everyone. Let's take a look at how Figured can really help you and your clients understand the financial performance of their cropping enterprises. And to keep this straightforward, we've structured this and approach into these sort of 3 progressive levels. And the level you'll work with really depends on the reporting needs of your client, or simply, the detail you have available. So that this will naturally influence the depth of insight you can really unlock. So first up, we have this financial basis only. And at this level, you're tracking the total income and expenses associated with the cropping enterprise as a whole. So you're not actually breaking it down into individual crops. So there's actually no need to enter or have access to yield data, hectares per crop, or quantities produced for each individual crop. This is basically enough to calculate an overall gross margin for the entire cropping enterprise. So really a great starting point, and this will pull through into your other reports as well. So you're going to get for your crop gross margin here, what your total income is for any crops that you've sold, what the total costs are associated, and what that gross margin is. And next we move into this intermediate level, and here's where we start to layer in those crucial production metrics. So this includes the key details like your hectares planted, the yields harvested, or things like your tons sold. And while you're tracking the direct costs at the overall sort of enterprise level, you're now directly sort of linking in those production numbers to that income generated from the farm. So sort of a step up on top of that sort of basic level, and then sort of finally jumping through to this detailed level. And this provides you, that complete sort of visibility, right? With both income and direct costs broken right down into each individual crop type and season, and even at a paddock level, if that's sort of the information or detail that you're wanting to go to. If I go across here, this is going to allow you to generate, again, the crop gross margin report, but now for each specific sort of crop type. So on this specific example here, I've broken it down into canola, wheat, and barley, and you can really sort of pinpoint, which of the crops are delivering the most value, identify sort of areas that might need attention, or strategically plan for future seasons here as well. You'd be able to compare, season on season for each specific crop type as well. So if you wanted to see canola a few years in a row, as well as now producing a crop season summary report. And I spoke to that level of detail before going down to that sort of paddock level information. I've got two fields here, and this is where you start to lay in that metric level. So what are we producing per hectare, per ton? Again, you're going to get any costs that are associated down to that paddock level information as well. And getting this reporting sorted, is obviously like a win on its own. But it's also really just the starting point because, once you've got, I guess, accurate sort of up-to-date reporting in place, you're in a completely different position. And, I think sort of the opportunity is it's not just really helping, for instance, a farmer solve that one thing. It's actually sort of turning those moments or asks into ongoing service offerings. And I think that's where, the real value is for, the advisor, as well as the farmer in this instance as well. And Jim, just before I pass it back over to Matt, sort of anything you're keen to sort of touch on or add around sort of turning any of those sort of one-off asks that you get into maybe something more structured and regular for any of your farmers?
Yeah, I think I certainly used to be more in the one-off space, and I still have plenty of that as well. From a client point of view, though, that is not always the best outcome for them. So increasingly, I'm moving towards trying to build more regular check-ins, which is, I mean, good for us as advisors because we can build plans and scale around doing that. But from the client point of view, knowing that they've got that in their diary, we're going to check in at this point. We'll get our zero file up to date. We'll get our figured forecast up to date. And then off the back of having that data all there, maybe it needs a little bit of work done together before we catch up, that you can then work more in the advice space and decision support space than in just the getting the data right. And so certainly that's where we're moving a lot more to, rather than just being reactive. The downside to clients on that is that my biggest challenge was availability. I might have 3 clients in 1 week have a bank review and need their things, their figured files updated, and that you kind of make that work, but not always in the best way for the client. But if there's predictability in when you're going to check in and catch up, that's built around their season. So looking in a couple of our districts, there's some key points of the year that are a good time to check in. So, late spring, for our spring croppers, we know what they've managed to get in the ground and what's got out of it. And so we get an idea of that. So that's a great time to check in around October, November. And if they've got a grazing business in with that, they've probably got their lambing and calving number as well. So you did your original budget back in May and June, and then around that October, November time, you can check in and do your first forecast. So rather than going one off, being more predictable and scheduled around that suits the clients. They get the availability of the advice and the data, and everyone knows what's happening when. That's definitely a good way for us to go as advisors, and in particular for the clients.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a win-win for the full farming team, right? So thanks for sharing. Matt, I'm just going to pass it back over to you, mate, now to discuss creating value for the full farming team.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, guys. And yeah, that was a really important discussion point there around the structured approach. Yeah, so I guess as you've heard throughout the discussion today, there's a lot of value to be had when you've got that sort of connected up farm financial information for decision making. And this, not only benefits the farmer and the advisor, but it's got those downstream benefits for bank managers who are assessing farm business on the amount of risk associated with lending. So I'm sure the bank managers on the call today would agree that having reliable and verifiable farm financials not only makes your jobs easier, but it removes risk associated with the credit for that farm. And when we talk about creating value for the entire farming team, we're talking about win-win-win outcomes. And when done really well, you can just, you can get better rates for farmers. There's referrals out the other end for accountants and quality data for bank managers whenever they need it. But at the end of the day, like, that farming family now has a better handle on their numbers and are more prepared to control the controllable. They've got the agility to move fast when conditions change, and go after those long-term goals with confidence. And we think that's a pretty worthwhile outcome, which is why Figured promotes bringing that farm team, together, led by the advisor as the custodians of the data. So you've got the tools at your fingertips, and moving into that more sort of connected ecosystem with your farming clients. So Andy, if you just want to chuck over to the next slide, mate. So to kind of wrap things up today, we wanted to bring it back to the practical side. So the reality of making a change inside a firm. And because we know the pain, spreadsheets everywhere, different workflows for different clients, pressure to do more with less. For a lot of firms, the idea of adding a new platform or changing how you work today can just feel like another thing. And Jim, you've gone through all of that, and you've kind of touched on parts of it today, but what was the kind of moment that pushed you to make a change here, and what helped that stick?
Look, you mentioned it then. The big thing was just not being able to repeat things efficiently. So going back to spreadsheets, and so I guess for the advisors on the call, taking the leap of throwing them away and jumping into Figured and doing that work in here. I definitely went through stages where I would retreat back to my spreadsheets because I knew them, but that definitely has been the biggest change for me, knowing that this is where I work. I work in Figured. I mean, there's the odd bit of unique work we'll still do in Excel, and especially as a client might be ramping up through those stages that Andy covered off. But the big win was definitely getting away from that being able to leverage other members of the team to provide that service more efficiently, and to better support clients. And I mean, the last piece we haven't spent a lot of time on, but the reporting capability in Figured definitely does professionalise your practice a lot more. Those you might remember the chart that Matt had up on the screen of the dashboard. All of those charts are repeatable in report packs, so you can the shape of that cash flow is a great one. If you've got a family board and you have a mixture of members that some are more involved in the financial side and less, those higher level snapshots can be a great way to get them context quickly about a key decision they need to have input on. So rather than layers of detailed spreadsheets, you can say, hey, we're going to need to get some more funding for this season. As you can see, we've gone into these crops that are heavier cost up front, and you can see where our shape of our cash flow is going to go. And those family members that need to support debt decisions and also the bank can see that really, really clearly on an example like that. And that other chart that was there, on the dashboard of the bridge of where the profit was planned to be and where it's got to, and being able to just show that as an image is a great and powerful tool that you can produce really efficiently. You don't have to produce it in Excel and reformat, change colours. It's just there. As soon as you've done the work, the output's there ready to go. You get straight into the advice, helping understand and work out what you're going to do as a result of it.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's awesome to hear the kind of real life applications there. And yeah, we haven't even touched on the report packs today, but being able to have that automatic reporting out to your clients, getting a monthly or quarterly email with the reports that they know that they're getting, it is so powerful. Cool. So I appreciate we're sort of getting near the end of time. So what's the next step for the advisors on the call today? So whether you want to, pilot this with a few clients, train up your team on crop tracking, or start building out your own advisory levels, we'll work with you to make it happen. We've done this before. We've helped firms out here. So if you want to take the next step, just reach out to Andy and I, or take a picture of the QR code and book just a 15-minute chat with Andy or me, and we can talk through it. We'll help you build out a pathway that works for you and your team, your clients, and your business at the right sort of level of detail. Thanks, Andy. Just want to flip to the next. And yeah, if you're a farmer who's joined today, thanks for attending. You can download the Farmer Starter Pack if you pull out your phone and scan that QR code there. It's got a lot of information around how you can, get started with Figured and engage your accountants. Would definitely recommend a good first step is to speak with your accountants, and chances are they might already be using Figured with other clients, or be kind of dabbling in it. So start the conversation, see where they're at and how they can support you. And if that's not an option, we do have a great sort of level of Figured advisors in our advisor directory. So that's at figured.com/advisors, where you see our partnerships located there. So thanks, guys. That concludes today's session. I'm not sure if there was any sort of other questions that sort of came through that anyone wants to call out, but a big thanks for attending. We know everyone's incredibly busy at the moment, and Jim, massive thanks for showing up and giving our audience some context to the work you're doing with Figured today and the evolving landscape you're navigating, and the incredible team that you're building at Newton Henry. It's very much appreciated. So look out for an email for us. We're going to send through the recording, and we can get back to you with any questions that were missed or weren't answered today. So thanks for your time, guys. We'll see you next time.